Winning the lottery sounds like a dream, right? But from the moment you hand in that winning ticket, the nightmare begins. Some lottery clerks don't celebrate with you, they plot against you. They know exactly how to steal your jackpot, and some of them actually pull it off. If you ever win, you better watch your back. Because these stories prove it can happen to anyone.
Sylvia C. Calleja. This story could have come from a criminal novel, but we guarantee it happened in real life. Sylvia Calleja was the owner of La Rampa supermarket in Miami, and she was literally living the dream. Her husband, Jose, had won the lottery a mind-blowing 11 times with tickets from Sylvia's store, bagging a total of $36,000. Pretty amazing, right? Maybe a little too amazing. You've probably guessed by now that Jose wasn't just unusually lucky. Sylvia had been stealing winning tickets from her customers for years, but she'd been getting away with it. So, when one more person walked in with a winning ticket, she never guessed she might be in hot water. Only this was no ordinary customer. The man standing in front of her was actually an undercover agent working for the lottery. He handed Sylvia a ticket and asked her to check if it had won anything. Obviously, it had. The undercover agent had deliberately handed Sylvia a winning ticket to see how she'd react. And without realizing what she was doing, she told the agent the ticket hadn't won anything. He left the store, but everyone involved in the investigation was now wanting to see when the winning ticket would reappear. It wasn't long before Jose tried to cash in the stolen ticket, but they were waiting for him. He was immediately arrested, and they'd soon take Sylvia into custody too. Think Sylvia's the only person who's been caught by an undercover lottery agent? Think again. The same thing happened to the next person on our list, Tina Dole.
Wouldn't it be a more accurate statement to say that you knew full well that that ticket was a winner?
Yep.
Tina Dole thought it was an ordinary day when a man walked up to her at the counter where she worked and asked her to check if his lottery ticket was a winner. It was, in fact. He was holding a $5,000 ticket. Only Tina didn't tell him that. She said it hadn't won anything, and as he left, she made sure to put the ticket somewhere safe. She didn't know that she just lied to an undercover agent who knew the ticket was worth $5,000. The lottery investigators waited to see if Tina had made a simple mistake or if she would cash the ticket that didn't belong to her. When she arrived to cash it in, they pulled her into an interrogation room. She told them she definitely bought the ticket somewhere in Madison, but said she couldn't remember which store it was. The investigators let her keep lying for a full half an hour before they told her they knew exactly where the ticket had come from because they'd given it to her. The game was up, and she admitted everything. Of course, it's not only undercover agents that have had their tickets stolen. Clerks are stealing from ordinary people all the time. For example, Kimberly Strand.
A West employee, Kimberly Strand, gave it to her boyfriend, who then offered his brother $500 to claim the prize. All three were found guilty.
In Wisconsin, Kimberly Strand spotted an opportunity when an old lady walked up to her counter. The lady politely asked Kimberly to check her lottery ticket. Kimberly scanned it and saw it was a winner. It was worth an impressive $10,000. We could all do with that. But Kimberly decided she deserved it more than the nice old woman in front of her. So, instead of mailing the ticket to the lottery office, she put it in her pocket. She later handed it to her boyfriend. They decided it was still too suspicious for him to cash it, so he offered his brother $500 to cash in the ticket. You'll be glad to hear they didn't get away with it. They were caught, and all three of them were found guilty. If you think that's not enough evidence that store clerks are out to steal your lottery ticket, here's some more. Edward Williams Brown.
Well, and that's why we do the compliance checks, is because we don't, our reputation, that public trust is everything to us.
Edward Williams Brown was a San Angelo clerk who spotted an opportunity one day. One of the store customers brought in a ticket which had won $1,000. I'll guess Edward had probably spent some time thinking about how to put other people's winnings into his wallet. Either that, or he was a pretty fast thinker. He told the customer after scanning his ticket that he'd won only $100. Not knowing any better, the unsuspecting customer took the $100 and went home. But Edward made sure to hang on to his ticket. 5 days later, Edward took the ticket he'd stolen from the customer to a lottery claim center. He filled out the Texas Lottery winner claim form as though he was the rightful owner of the winning ticket, but that was a mistake. Someone quickly spotted that the claim form wasn't filled out correctly, and they alerted the authorities. They were happy enough to arrest Edward in 2020 off the back of the lottery ticket theft. After all, he had 2 other charges against him already. The other 2 charges were pretty serious too. They were 2 assaults against members of his own family. He was offered bail, which would cost him $5,000. So, in the end, trying to get his hands on the $1,000 wasn't even nearly worth it. He's not the only thief to try that method. The next person on our list did something pretty similar. Christelle Yvette Baton. Christelle Yvette Baton was working at a Winn-Dixie liquor store in Fort Myers when she got an idea. A customer had walked into the store asking if his lottery ticket had won anything. It was in fact worth $600, but Christelle handed him $5 instead. She thought that was pretty smart, but she had no idea she actually hadn't gotten away with her crime. Have you guessed it yet? That man was another undercover agent. She was charged for her crimes and hopefully learned a valuable lesson that day. Christelle had to face up to justice that day, but not quite as much as the next people on our list. The Chung family. Back in 2003, Daniel Campbell walked into a nearby convenience store in Ontario, Canada, to buy some lottery tickets. David and 6 of his friends from work had been playing as part of a lottery pool together, but they had never won. But today, David was about to get lucky in the family-run convenience store. David picked his ticket, and even though it didn't earn him any cash straight away, he did win 5 free plays. So he picked 5 more tickets and handed them to the store owner, Jun Chul Chung, while the owner's son, Kenneth, who managed the store, stood nearby. Jun Chul told David none of his tickets were winners and handed back some tickets. David left, not realizing that he'd only been given 4 out of his 5 tickets. The 5th one was still in the hands of Jun Chul, who decided he'd hang on to it when he realized it had just won David $9.2 million. Jun Chul got his daughter, Kathleen, in on the deal. He figured it would be safer for her to cash in the ticket because she didn't have anything to do with their store. When she went to cash in the ticket, she raised red flags when she told them she didn't remember where she got the ticket. They chose to give her the winnings anyway. The family of the thieves wasted no time spending the stolen jackpot. They mainly used it to buy mansions and sports cars, and they were sure they'd gotten away with the crime. But a few months later, an investigator from the Ontario Lottery spotted that Kathleen's family owned the convenience store. It took a shockingly long time for the crime to be connected, but it does have a happy ending. In 2011, 8 years after his ticket was stolen, David was handed his prize. He couldn't believe his luck, and he'd even split the winnings with his 6 friends like they'd agreed all those years ago. And the family who stole the ticket felt the cold hand of justice. Kenneth got a 10-month sentence, Kathleen got 4 years in prison, and Jun Chul was sentenced to 7 years. And that wasn't all. They were also fined $3.5 million to pay back the rest of the money they owed Daniel. Courts took all the mansions and cars the family had bought and sold them off. It's good to know that crime doesn't pay. Everyone loves it when the bad guys get caught, but sadly, it doesn't always work out that way. Just ask the next rightful winner on our list. Unnamed London clerk. Peter Rhodes is a veteran from London who was just about to turn 60 years old. He only ever played the lottery when the jackpots got big enough. He always hoped he'd win millions to give to his adult children. And in 2019, his wish came true. Peter took his ticket to a store to check if he had won anything. When the clerk put it into the scanner, the machine immediately started making a noise that celebrated a winning ticket. Peter was super excited until things got weird. Peter asked if he could have his ticket back, and the clerk refused to give it to him. Now, Peter was suspicious. He watched as the clerk took 3 steps to the right and put his ticket under the counter. Peter leaned over the counter to get a better view of what the clerk was doing and spotted a stack of about 80 lottery tickets on the counter. The clerk came back over to Peter, picked up one of the tickets off the top of the stack, and handed it to Peter, along with some change that was worth about $15. But Peter knew that wasn't his ticket. Not only had he seen the clerk pick it up off the stack, but Peter had also folded his ticket twice to fit it into his wallet, while the new ticket was totally flat. Peter was really upset after that visit to the store, but he couldn't convince the clerk to give him his ticket back. So he contacted Camelot, the company that handles the lottery in the UK. With a little detective work and dedication, someone at Camelot was able to prove that Peter had bought the winning ticket. They were also able to tell Peter for the first time how much his ticket was actually worth. He won a shocking 6.5 million British pounds. That's over $8 million. You think that was an open and shut case. Only it wasn't. Soon after, Peter was contacted by the fraud department at Camelot. But instead of telling Peter he was going to get his millions, they told him they were closing his case because they didn't want to pay out twice. Obviously, Peter was shocked. The clerk had obviously cashed in his winning ticket, and nobody had noticed he wasn't the real winner. Even worse, he was getting away with it. He contacted the police, but they didn't want to help either. Instead, they just told him to handle it on his own. I'm sure you can agree, this sounds like a nightmare. He's put a legal team together in the hopes that they'll be able to help him claim the millions of dollars he won. But at this time, there's still no news that he's been successful. Tragically, it looks like the thief is going to win. All we're saying is, make sure you get your ticket back. We know that's a pretty terrible story. The next one isn't much better, but we'll let you know up front that it does have a happier ending. Andy Ashkar.
6 years after he scammed Miles out of a $5 million lottery ticket, Ashkar learned his fate, getting the maximum of 8 1/3 to 25 years in prison.
In 2006, New York maintenance worker Robert Miles decided to try his luck on a scratch-off ticket. He was down on his luck and really needed a boost. So he couldn't believe it when the man behind the counter told him he'd won. It wasn't much though. It was a $5,000 win. That meant that Robert could take home $4,000, and the store would keep $1,000. Robert was hungover and accepted that as a little bit of luck. He needed it. But that was only a fraction of what he should have got. The man behind the counter was Andy Ashkar, the son of the people who owned the shop. He was also the owner of a very successful car dealership. With a large income of his own, he had no reason to steal from Robert, but he chose to anyway. When he spotted that the ticket was worth $5 million, he figured he'd keep it for himself. He then waited years to cash in the ticket, as long as he was allowed. In that time, Robert, who should have had $5 million in the bank, was forced to file for bankruptcy. You'll be glad to hear that Andy didn't get away with this crime. Lottery officials got suspicious because he'd waited so long to cash in the ticket. The investigation showed he wasn't the rightful owner of the ticket. The judge was not kind to him. He gave Andy the maximum sentence of 8 to 25 years in prison. Andy tried to be smart by waiting to cash the ticket, but it still seems like a pretty simple way to commit a crime. The next person on our list tried a slightly smarter method. But what was it? Wendy Maxine Klinker. In February 2018, a customer complained that a Gold Rush doubler scratch-off ticket that he bought at a Circle K store in Florida had strange scratches on the winning boxes. He was given another ticket, but he wasn't the only one. Soon, there were over $600 worth of tickets that had strange scratches on them and couldn't be sold. The store reported the damaged tickets to the lottery, and it didn't take their investigators long to work out what had happened. Wendy Maxine Klinker, who worked as the store clerk, was tampering with the tickets. She would make tiny scratches on the tickets that allowed her to see which ones were winners. She'd keep those for herself and put the losing tickets back for customers to buy. She wasn't the only clerk at the store, but it was easy enough to work out she was the culprit because she was caught red-handed on the store's CCTV. And she's not the only person who came up with that idea. The next person on our list did the same thing. So, did it work better for him? Omar Ali. Omar Ali had worked at the Timewise convenience store in Houston, Texas for 8 years before someone spotted something suspicious on the surveillance camera. Omar seemed to be doing something with the scratch-off lottery ticket that hadn't been sold. In case you don't know, that's classified as a felony in American law. It turned out he'd been doing this a long time. He'd used a pin to make tiny scratches in the ticket that would allow him to see if the ticket was an instant winner or not. And some of them were. In fact, a few were worth up to $1 million. Weirdly, the court documents don't say what he was doing with the tickets. But we assume he was taking the winning tickets out of the pack and buying them for himself, and putting the ones he knew wouldn't earn him anything back into the pack for customers to buy. We can only guess how many winners there would have been if he hadn't done that. Luckily, he was sentenced, but he was out of jail on bond by 2020. That's one way to check a scratch-off ticket. But the next person on our list came up with a different method, and she nearly got away with it. Sydney Renee Wilson. Sydney Renee Wilson was working at a gas station when one day she spotted an opportunity. She realized that she could use the stack of scratch-off lottery tickets in front of her to her advantage. Normally, scratch-off tickets can't be scanned until they've been, well, scratched off. But Sydney realized that if she'd scratched just a little off the bottom of the ticket, she could expose the barcode, and that would allow her to scan the ticket. Why is that important? Because it would allow her to check which tickets were winners. Sydney could take the winners for herself and cash them in. Only she wasn't paying for any of the tickets. The store soon realized that something was wrong when they checked their books. Sydney had stolen so many lottery tickets that they've cost the store nearly $3,000. They checked their security footage and were shocked to see what Sydney had been doing. As if the lottery tickets weren't enough, she was also caught on camera taking cash out of the register and putting it straight into her pocket. The store managers called the police, and she was charged with fraud and theft. So we've seen a lot of criminals using similar methods to steal tickets, but the next person on our list took a unique approach. Shakenya Louise James. Shakenya Louise James was working as a convenience store clerk when one day she'd figured she won the jackpot. Only she hadn't bought any tickets. Instead, she'd been handed a box full of them. How did that happen? When the store received a shipment of new lottery tickets, Shakenya decided nobody would notice if she just took a box for herself. Seems too simple? That's because it is. Firstly, someone's going to notice that 150 lottery tickets have gone missing, especially when they're worth a total of $300. And sure enough, the missing tickets were reported to the police. Secondly, you can't just take a whole box of lottery tickets and hope to win the jackpot. The tickets need to be activated before they can be redeemed for a cash prize. And third, if you think you're going to steal a whole box of lottery tickets, it's probably not smart to sign for the delivery. Everyone was waiting to catch Shakenya, and sure enough, the tickets started popping up around town. She was getting small batches of tickets scanned at different stores, probably hoping it would be less suspicious. It wasn't. But the first ticket already had people on high alert. She tried to scan it at the store where she worked. And if that wasn't bad enough, she got angry when the scanner rejected it, not realizing that the ticket needed to be activated first. She then called up the lottery commission to complain that the scanner wasn't working. This was a pretty open and shut case when they arrested her. And not just because she was the only person working at the store that day. If you're thinking that people on this list were pretty stupid to get their lottery tickets stolen, we can prove that this can happen to anyone. Just check out our list of famous celebrities who were scammed for millions of dollars.